Hello.
Hi.
I am here today with Anjali Bhatia, CEO of Collegewise. We have a bunch to talk about, including the future of college admissions and post-secondary options. But before we get there, Anjali, would you mind just telling us a little bit about where you come from and how you ended up as CEO of Collegewise?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to jump into these conversations. So, my interest in high school admissions and working with high schoolers actually came from when I was in high school. I went to a public, strong school in suburban New Jersey, so not too far from New York City. And I get to high school, and everyone seemed to be running around signing up for volunteer service hours. Like, this was the thing of my high school, this notion that you could volunteer at these different activities. And if you got a lot of volunteer hours, you were going to go to a great school. Um, and this was the early 2000s, so not even a fraction as competitive as is now. And so I did the same, right? Like I started just signing up for all these volunteer hours. And I was blown away that a lot of the times I didn't even understand what we were trying to do. It very much felt like busy work, both for the student and for the people coordinating it. And so a piece of me just thought, hey, is there a way we can better understand the nonprofit and what we're doing? And this really snowballed into what I now know as social entrepreneurship. So, how can you better investigate, learn, think through solutions, whether it's through the nonprofit or something you do on your own? So I took a version of this, started putting it into my high school, then to other high schools. By the end of high school, I was actually flying across the country and speaking with different organizations. And then by the time I got to college, I thought, how can we make this more sustainable? So we created a DVD based curriculum. So this is really dating me
I
to
love
our
that.
relatives. And so I had this small foray into ed tech. How do you call a superintendent, talk to them about this? How do you speak to ninth grade teachers? We were looking at social studies classrooms. So then when I graduated, as many students do, I went into strategy consulting, but I really wanted to focus on education. So I mostly worked with the US Department of Education, with several higher ed institutes. I saw what enrollment and admissions actually look like from that side, and then worked with some education nonprofits. And this piece of me was calling to go back to be a bit more entrepreneurial. So I went to do my MBA and I started a vocational education company focused on cosmetologists and estheticians, taking new concepts, teaching them. It ended up becoming more of a beauty B2B supply company, less around the education. So, in a lot of ways, we were successful. It just wasn't personally what I wanted to do. So, after a few years, it was acquired, which was an incredible experience. And that's where I sort of fell into admissions. So, there was a New Zealand based education company that was looking to launch their US presence. So I came on board, helped them scale up, launch Canada, Mexico as well. And then about 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to interview with Collegewise. And so I've been CEO here ever since.
That's awesome. So many different roads we could take there, and I love. I really empathize with that sort of entrepreneurial bug. I think, and it sounds like you've gotten to embrace that taking over at CollegeWise. Can you just for the record, can you talk about what CollegeWise does and in a little bit more detail, and then maybe some of the exciting initiatives that you've been working on since you came on board?
Absolutely. So at our core at Collegewise, we are looking at giving the most up to date, accurate, honest advice around admissions. And the way that we do that impacts a lot of students, but in different ways. So many people know us through our content. So we do a lot of webinars. We publish the official guide to the Common App. We work with a lot of school districts around the country in supporting them with admissions advice. And then a portion of that population works with our counselors, tutors, and experts more directly. So they're looking for the advice with their child, meeting with an expert regularly, coming up with a plan. And so it really depends on the student and their grade, how we help them. But oftentimes they're working with a counselor over the course of a few years, thinking through all these questions around high school. What classes should I take? What do I do over the summer? Should I get a job? Do I need to play a sport? Which test do I take? So the counselor guides them through all of that, helping them really develop who they are and their story. And then a lot of our students get tutoring across many different things. And some
Hmm.
of the more interesting things are actually the expert advice we give to students around developing their own success skills, which is what we call it. So things like time management, effective communication, like how does a student learn to write an email? We give a lot of guidance there, and that grows into leadership. So we help students really really look at who they are, do a lot of self-discovery, and then think about what leadership means to them because it's not always president of the student body government. And so coming back to my origin story, I've always been very interested in helping high schoolers connect to what they care about and what they can do. And so that's a lot of what we're doing in building the relationship with the student, helping them think through what their strength is and how they can actually give back to something they care about or get involved in, even if it's a for-profit business idea they have, like how can they actually focus on that? We also have students who have no idea what they want to do. They might be struggling in school for a variety of reasons. And so it's also helping them know that they're okay. There will be a path forward, and what are the steps they can do to get there rather than them feeling overwhelmed, anxious, scared of those next pieces in the journey.
I'm curious, like, and it sounds like you serve a pretty diverse array of students. What are some of the like maybe surprising things that students are finding themselves doing in high school that your counselors are encouraging? What are like I to your point, like I grew up too. It was like you either played a sport, you know, 40 hours a week, or you were trying to volunteer with a nonprofit. Are there other sort of emerging trends that you're seeing students up to?
That's a great question. Uh, I would say the amount of time students spend on high school related things just continues to go up. So there's just an escalation of feeling as though every minute needs to be committed. And so I think
Yeah.
students do more activities, they're doing way more in academics than they usually need to. So it's sort of counterintuitive to what parents think, but a huge way that we add value is actually helping students realize where they don't need to spend time.
Oh, interesting. Um, what about like, are they taking like is work and jobs relevant? How do they think about like balancing hobbies versus jobs? What are some of the paths that you see there?
Yeah, I actually love when students come to me and they say something like, "Oh, I do nothing." And then I get to know them and they have these hobbies. They just don't realize it's something you can put on a common app, for example, the
Yeah.
main portal through which you apply. Um, so yeah, in some ways, even having your own TikTok is a hobby. It's having a job is a great work experience thing. Teaching yourself the guitar, taking care of a family member who's sick, there's all these things that we sort of tease out to help show that you are putting your time into places that you can talk about, especially if it is that TikTok example. Like, what are you posting on your TikTok? Is there a way to connect it to a cause you care about? So I think students aren't always sure what is allowed to be put down. And we certainly encourage a lot of the things that are very practical for them. So if they do need to save money for college, then we're going to very heavily encourage jobs and then help them within the context of the job. How can they have that impact, showcase their version of leadership within it to make the most of it? Versus saying, oh, this kid 2 years above me, they played the violin and got into Yale. So we don't want that. We don't want you to copy. We want you to think around the reality of where you need to spend your time, what you would like to do with that extra time, the places you don't need to spend time, and then really kind of triangulate and figure out the best plan for them.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of drives me nuts about the media industry around college admittance is this focus on the ultra elite, right? And it's like the kid who applied to, all of the Ivy League schools and was accepted to all of them. It's like, yeah, like a person exists and like, I hope they go on to a very fruitful, life and career, et cetera. But like it's not the vast majority of people. And so like I feel like there's a ton of media examples of that kid, but there's not as much about the kid who, held down a manager job at a fast casual restaurant for, 18 months before finishing high school, which maybe in their own way is also pretty unique. But I think I wish there were more stories about that type of experience, or the kid who found a way to 100,000 TikTok followers, which I feel like the mainstream media is not really equipped to talk about. But it sounds like you see almost every day.
Yeah, that's so true, and it's sort of this specific times of year the media just hyper fixates on the Ivy League, elite schools, admissions rates, and I'd say we're the only company of our size within this space that intentionally does not just talk about the top schools. I think that's pretty incredible because we're able to help students get into very competitive colleges for them, but we consider much more than just rankings. We consider what they want to do long term, how they can be successful down the line. And I think that actually is very true of our counseling style too, that we're not just harping on things that make students anxious that isn't productive. So instead of saying, oh, California student, the UCs are so much harder for you now, we're focusing on what they can control. And we find that that helps students really open up on their essays. If they're thinking just about how hard it is, they're really clamming up. So I think it's helpful that we have this brand that's centered around this admissions process actually being a time of self reflection, and we try to bring joy into the process. We start with asking questions to the student about who they are, moments that have changed them, who's influenced them, rather than just saying, "Hey, write this first draft of an essay." And so it fosters this really incredible mentorship between our counselors and tutors and the students. And I think within the education industry, especially during the pandemic, we saw that there were so many things that schools tried, and fundamentally what worked really came down to mentorship. And that's what we're trying to do as we work with these students. And then from a business perspective, I think because we don't just focus on the top schools, we are able to work with school districts. So we do things like admissions boot camps, helping the students get their first draft of the Common App done, especially in districts that don't have high completion of those types of things, and it alleviates a lot of pressure off the school counselors. And then we also serve as a corporate benefit for a lot of the Fortune 100 companies, so they can take some stress off their employees' plates because the employees are eligible to give their students these admissions hours. So I think it's great for us because we really do get to work with a wide range of students, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting to hear you describe that. And in a lot of ways, I think about my experience as an investor, and this sort of interesting flow of information between investor and company. Um, you know, Companies only raise money 4 or 5 times in their lifespan if they're lucky. But investors are talking about fundraising almost every day. And similarly, you know, high school age students are probably only preparing to go to a university once, maybe twice in their life. But you talk about this every day, and so there's this information asymmetry that you're trying to alleviate to get them into the best institution for them. And it sounds like a lot of it is just sort of blocking and tackling. Like, hey, did you even know this option existed? In a really positive way. And along those lines, I'm curious. there's a ton of media headlines around, how everybody's questioning the value of college, which to me is, sort of negative in a way that I don't love. But I think the inverse of that, and something I'd be curious to hear from you is, well, what is a good school for, again, like, let's leave the sort of elite students out of the equation, but like, how do you help, today's, call it high school age student? And I know there's a lot of non-traditional learners out there too that we've
Mhm.
just put those to the side for now. But like, how do you help them decide what a good school is, and what the right good school is for them and in their sort of educational journey?
Yeah, Matt, you're so right. I think there are a lot of headlines around this topic. Is AI completely going to transform higher
Right.
ed? Um, I'd say from our side, we've seen students and parents really have more anxiety about the future and career. So I think one of the biggest shifts we're going to see is the interest in computer science right now. Any major that people feel AI will replace, people are really questioning it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we're seeing. Going back to your question around what's actually a good school, I think about it in a few different dimensions. So the first is learning style. I think families often just look at rankings, which I understand. I use Wirecutter when I'm
It
looking at.
simplifies things.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Too much information out there. But it's very hard to get a sense of how structurally academia is set up for certain types of students. So we'll ask a lot of questions around how, what kind of classes a student's like, what their high school is like. We're getting that sort of context, and if they learn better in a certain way, or if they have a learning difference, we can really help match their college list to make sure that they're successful in college. We're also thinking about their future aspirations. Even if they're not sure what they want to do, we want to set them up for success from that perspective. There are certain state schools that are very rigid about what major you put down and whether or not you can get into the requirements. So, where the student's at, we can actually really map out to what's gonna give them that chance to explore or be in a place if they're sure they wanna do something like aeronautical engineering. We wanna make sure that they're at a school that they have all those career opportunities to work for, Boeing afterwards. And then affordability. I think people still really don't understand the sticker price of college and the way that it's designed that they're gonna throw money at you if you are a student that they really want. And so a lot of students will just not apply to schools when they look at what the full tuition is. And so we're really unpacking that, figuring out their expected financial contributions, what their future career is, what they're taking on with debt, and the magnitude of that debt. All of those sorts of things. Yeah, again, they come together to help us understand that right fit.
Gotcha. So, and as students are going on this journey with you, you mentioned the Common App and how one of the things you do is help students fill out the Common App. One of the trends we've seen in the more recent past is this, um, fill out the Common App, get immediate admittance to maybe a bunch of different schools. And that varies by student, of course, but this sort of direct admissions trend. I'm curious if you are seeing any other trends that are worth calling out, related to this, like, getting from high school to a post-secondary option. So whether that's direct admissions or something else that, you, from a business perspective, just as much from an advising perspective, are trying to stay on top of, to make sure that you're there for the next wave of college options.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think we're seeing such differences between the top 100, let's say, and the schools that are really just looking to get more applicants because they're concerned around the enrollment cliff and how they're going to survive. So, with top schools, I'd say this is true over the last 10, 15 years. Um, as they're getting more applicants, And students generally are applying to more and more schools. It used to be, you apply to 3 in your home state. Now people are applying to maxing out the 20 on the Common App, then adding the UCs, then adding the UK. So colleges really care about yield. And so, one of the ways that schools very successfully have figured out if a student's interested is by adding more barriers. So, that's more unique essays. It's not that copy and paste. It's taking more students in the early rounds, especially early decision. It's putting more students on wait lists. It's basically playing these games that if you can figure out if students going to accept, then you will really take them. So I think we continue to see interesting trends around there. I think one one sort of avenue schools are trying that seems to be gathering steam is video-based interviews. So there'll be questions.
Mm,
Oftentimes the school doesn't know them, and the student just has a few minutes and it auto records it. And so this started mostly with international students, and it's becoming more popular with certain programs within the US. So a lot of schools have added that as an optional thing students can do. But I think in the world of AI essays, this might become a lot more popular. As for schools that are really looking to get enrollment numbers up, certainly joining the Common App and making it as easy
sure.
as possible to apply,
Yeah.
having a very strong social media presence where they're featuring facilities or very specific programs students tend to like co-op style things. Those are all things that we're seeing on both sides.
Yeah, I think on the co-op front, one of the things I'm watching is having students more involved in the actual, like, operations of the campus. So there are a couple of different models that it's like, have the students run the coffee shop, have the students run the bookstore, stuff like that, I hope, in my personal vision for the future of colleges in the US is you have students taking more ownership and more responsibility alongside their academic requirements and learning how to learn and work at the same time. So that's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I hope comes true. Um, I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but maybe to wrap, as you think about the evolution of Collegewise, one of the things just in your intro that struck me is it sounds like the Collegewise product, as it were, has been sort of a natural evolution from, you know, uh, admissions consulting and maybe some test prep to admissions consulting plus test prep to, maybe on the employee benefit side. I'm guessing there's some parent education going on as well. And it sounds like it's been this sort of stack of um, adjacent things put together to create a more holistic relationship with the student and everybody surrounding the student. Are there other sort of things that might feel natural to add to the CollegeWise product, um, or partner with others on that front, that you're spending a lot of time thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly I think as all CEOs are right now, I'm thinking a lot about AI and
Sure.
the
Yeah.
ways that we can use it, and the ways that we're choosing not to. So I think college-wise at our core, we're this company of admissions nerds who are exceptional at engaging with people, with parents who are anxious, with students who aren't sure what they want to do or are go-getters and they want to take over the world today. So I really am very focused on the human aspect of what we do and how we can bolster this level of thought leadership and knowledge around data using AI, but use it to empower our teams. So one big focus I have right now is returning to our roots of more in-person office locations. So college-wise, at our largest, we probably had around 27 offices throughout the country. And then under the pandemic, we closed a lot of them and moved mostly to virtual services. And we have counselors, all over the country. We have over 100 and then many, many tutors. So now we're really looking back at where we have high concentration of families, and we're going back to the office. We want to foster that mentorship, that really often can be even more powerful when people meet in person. So I'd say that's one big place that we're thinking about how we add a lot of value. And on the other side of it, the data piece, um, colleges don't put information out in consistent ways. So I think it would be like incredibly hard for AI to truly replace
Yeah.
institutional priorities of a school. We have a few things like the common data set, but that gives such limited information for a family. But I continue to look for hiring people who are intellectually curious about this space because they can attend the sessions that universities are putting on, go to the conferences with admissions reps, learn what's important for them, and then they can really facilitate that match of getting the students who would love that college to the admissions officer. So it's really win win. So, yeah, I think it's a lot about intellectual curiosity and then taking all this information across our hive mind and figuring out how we share. So we've created a pretty cool internal tool of all of our Slack communications and how AI can now pull from information throughout Slack, and a lot of the other places that we put information. So, yeah, I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying seeing how work doesn't need to be created and researched time and time again from this very powerful hive mind and how we can really continue to strengthen the information we're putting out there.
Yeah, I had a sort of eerie experience yesterday where I gave ChatGPT like a pretty simple, like sort of lazy prompt. It was like, "Hey, can you like do this description?" And it intuited a like what client it was for, what portion of the work for that client I was probably asking about, went and looked up the files that were relevant to that portion of the work, and then produced an outcome that actually like pretty well integrated the like custom data inputs from that client into the response. And I was like, whoa,
Wow.
that's magic. Because normally it's like it gives you give it a generic prompt, you get a generic answer. This was one of the first where I was the lazy one, and it gave me a way more specific answer than I was expecting. And I'm glad to hear that you've intuited that there is like a strong, perhaps even stronger demand for a human connection. And it's saying, yeah, we're a digital company, but we have a human touch point in a lot of cities. um, I think that to me feels like the right direction ahead. Like, I don't know anything about anything, but like there's an emotional resonance to that hopefully pays off commercially. So um, we are getting close to time here, so I want to be respectful of that. I'm so grateful that you were willing to take the time and share what you're working on at Collegewise. Any final notes that we didn't get to that you want to make sure folks hear about before we wrap up?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This was great to talk through. Um, my final note, okay, if a parent is listening to this and they're anxious about their child's future and, will there be college, will there not? There is so much that you can do with a high schooler to just prepare them to have the right skills, and to be able to answer those questions of what they want to do down the line. It doesn't need to be right away. So I'd say, first of all, please try not to be too anxious. I think there are certainly good things coming. But what's so important is empowering your high schooler to start making decisions for themselves and give them that space to explore. And I can assure you that it can be translated into a very strong admission story down the line. So you don't need to follow these cookie cutter things. And if you let your student lean into their interests and figure out what they feel they're strong in and what they want to get better at, they can do some pretty cool things, even if it is on TikTok or involves playing a lot of Fortnite. There are ways we can connect the things they like to do, that I think is where I really see a lot of that magic unlocking.
I love that. Um, not to oversimplify it, but it sounds like have a conversation with your kid. There are a lot of great potential paths, um, and especially in areas that you and I and a lot of other parents don't really understand. But you and your team are pretty good at turning into a coherent story that um, makes sense to an admissions officer.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, you and I we're parents of young children right now, but already this idea of only a few years with your child, or you only have so many summers. Like time
Yeah,
is precious, and I think my hope is that parents get to spend those final years with their child at home, having a relationship versus trying to project manage admissions down the line.
yeah, I love that, and I certainly am going to take it to heart myself. And I'm looking forward to comparing notes with you over the over the next few years.
That
Um, so thank you so much, and I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Yes, thank you. Take care.